the rules changes come up every 2 years after an election. Some of the rules that they looked, and actually fortunately were able to get passed despite the recommendation from despite the vote of my representative. One of the rules they wanted, for example, was to have enough time to read the bills. They wanted 24 to 48 hours to read a bill before they had to vote on it, because they thought it was important that they knew what was in that bill before they voted on it. That was one of the things that had a lot of pushback from leadership. They were ultimately able to get that through, which is terrific. There was so much more emphasis on the House and Senate rules last year than there ever have been in the past. People were finally paying attention, people were showing up, and people were coming in to testify. So they were able to get that change, which is fantastic. But the fact that there was so much pushback about that. One of the other rules that they wanted to implement was a strategy that you could not suspend the rules at the end of the session. So historically, at the end of the session, in the last couple of days, they literally vote on hundreds of bills, right? So there's no way you can possibly read through every bill. There's changes constantly being made. So there were representatives that had submitted a bill initially, and then there were so many changes made that when it came up to be voted on in those last couple of days, they didn't even know if they should vote for their own bill because there were so many changes made, right? And they didn't have time to read that bill. So by not suspending the rules, it would change the structure so that you do not have to vote literally on hundreds of bills in those last couple of days. That vote did not go through, that change did not go through last year, but what we did see because of the discussion that it brought about was for the first time last year, they did not suspend the rules at the end of the session. So that, even though it did not change the actual rules, progress has been made. And what we're seeing this year is that bills are being heard and voted on earlier. Last year at the end of the session, because they did not suspend the rules, there were so many bills that went unvoted on at the end of the session and just kind of left for dead. This year, we're already seeing in the first week of session, the first couple of weeks of session, they were already bringing them to be heard, they were already bringing them into committee and then out onto the floor, and we're already voting on important bills, and they're starting that process much earlier so that they don't get stuck at the end of the year having to vote on all of them. So those are some of the types of things that we want to see. The changes that they asked, like I said, having time to read the bill and not suspending all the rules at the end, they were not unreasonable requests.
Wasn't there also something about trying to create a situation where the body could force a bill out of committee?
Yes, there was. So if there were enough sponsors on a bill, then you can take it out of committee and bring it to the floor for a vote. But in order to do that, you have to have people sign on to do that. And what they do is they keep that paperwork to sign on to bring that to a vote directly on the table in front of the speaker, so it's under his eyes. And he's watching everybody that comes up to do that. And it can be very intimidating for representatives who rely on the approval of the speaker to get their other bills heard. So one of the rule requests that they had was to take that, be able to pick up that bill and carry it around to the floor to get signatures on it. Just remove it from the table and bring it around and ask representatives to sign on as a sponsor to the bill. And that was another thing that was never approved. It's an intimidation tactic, and it's one way to maintain control by legislative leadership.